3 years ago, when I grew these dragonfruit seeds into a cactus plant, I never knew they would grow actual pads that are in fact edible. And although it was tough, and at times I almost killed my plant, I didn't just spend 1,095 days growing this cute cactus to not try and cook that pad and eat it. So, I cut a piece of my cactus pad off. And as I was getting ready to cook it, I realized that these may not in fact be dragonfruit cactus pads, but either my cactus bear pads or my bunny cactus plant. I had so many different cactus plants growing that it was so hard to even tell the difference because so much time had passed. This is how my bunny cactus grew up, and this is how my cactus pear grew up. So it was kind of hard to tell which was which. They all looked pretty similar, but either way, I was excited that I grew what we were about to cook up to eat, the pad of either a dragonfruit, cactus pear, or bunny cactus. So anywho, I got my cactus pad, placed it on a cutting board, and cut off that outer layer of skin. There wasn't much to work with, and this was my first time ever cooking one of these things, so I wasn't even sure if I was doing it right, but I thought to myself that this had better be worth it based on all of the prickles that I got stuck in my hands. I got the cut up cactus pads into a pan to start cooking, and I got very curious to see what these things truly even are. As they cooked, I learned that they are called Nopales, and it's very popular to find this ingredient in some salads, appetizers, usually down in South America. So I thought to myself, you know what, I might as well book a trip and head down to South America to make sure that we do this right. So I did, but I couldn't go anywhere before trying the ones that were on this pan, of course. This is what we were working with once they finished cooking. Rafi seemed to really like the smell of them, so I guess that meant we were on the right track. But the moment of truth came to try them. They are pretty slimy. I wasn't really sure how I felt about them. For some reason, I just felt like I did it wrong. And my trip to South America was still a couple weeks away, and I was getting impatient. But one day, I found myself hiking a mountain, and some cactus pads had fallen off their mother cactus at the side of the road, and I thought, wow, what a perfect opportunity to try cooking them one last time before we head down to South America. So you know what I had to do. I took them home with me, planted one in the ground, and then started cutting up the other one. And this time it was thick, it looked juicy, and I really felt confident that these would be delicious. I started cutting the outer layer of skin off, noticed how slimy they were, which kind of grossed me out, but I was really feeling good at this point, knowing how cool it was to be able to cook my own cactus pad. I got them all cut up into pieces, and the only thing I had left to do was to cook them. So I did, and then I plated them up. They looked pretty crispy and actually pretty good, and finally, I tasted them. At first, I thought they were good, but then they had this aftertaste that was kind of slimy, and I had no idea what I did wrong. I know these are a staple in South America, and I was really upset because after 2 failed attempts, I just wanted to experience the luxury of trying cactus pads and enjoying them the right way. So it was in that moment where I had a little epiphany and realized, well, it's a good thing my flight to Mexico is tomorrow, and so I'm sure you know what happened next. I recruited my friends, got my suitcase, hopped on an airplane, and flew all the way down to Mexico. And once we arrived, we made our way to the jungle specifically so we could make a meal out of cactus pads. We had to pick the cactus pads that were lighter green because the darker green ones meant that they weren't ready to pick and cook yet. The wonderful ladies let me know they obtained these from the side of the road about 200 meters down from their property, and I was ready to get pricked by these cactus pads and learn how to really make them. My ladies got our cactus pads ready and we got to work right away. She showed us how to cut the prickies off, and it's a good thing I came down to Mexico because you don't actually have to cut off all the skin, just the prickies, and that was cool to learn. We peeled all the spines off and we were instructed to be careful, but we also had a doctor on site, aka the son of one of these awesome ladies, ready to go with some handy dandy tweezers to pull out any extremities that got stuck in our hands. And not more than a minute into cutting the spines off, I needed the doctor to remove them from my fingers. Word on the street is that I had to find the doctor at least 2 or 3 times, possibly more, okay, but it's not the full experience if you wear gloves, so I was happy. And once we finally finished picking off all the spines, it was time to cut the cactus into little pieces and get them prepped for cooking. We cut them into very, very tiny squares, and it was going to be cooked down to become filling inside of homemade corn tortilla appetizers, as well as a little fried vegetable dish for the lunch. And I was pumped because we all know that I've never been able to do this right. And finally, here I was. We learned that nopales are very good for pregnant women to consume, and that was quite interesting to know. But before we knew it, all the cactus pads were cut up and ready for cooking. The ladies mentioned it would take a while to cook them, so while they cooked them, we went to jump in a cenote real quick, and as soon as we returned, the food was ready. We started our meal with an appetizer, nopales with corn tortillas. And those were actually delicious. I had no idea I was even eating cactus pads. Way better than I had initially done it. I was already satisfied at this point. But then came the full meal. We had chicken, veggies, potatoes, and nopale fried veggie salad. And this, to me, was the ultimate moment of truth, to taste them. As for the taste, I personally really enjoyed it. It has a specific texture that you kind of gotta get used to. It's a little bit slimy, but it's very tasty. And it's so awesome to know we pricked it right off the cactus, cut the spines off, cut it in little pieces, cooked it, and ate it straight from the plant. It's safe to say that I was happy, and it was tasty, and the flavor was so unique. I was so grateful for the experience and privilege of being able to hop over to Mexico to try one of the goals that had been on my mind for 3 years. It's all trial and error on this channel, okay? We already know that. So, 10 out of 10 decision to grow a dragon fruit that grew cactus pads that I would fail to cook successfully myself, and that would inevitably bring me down to Mexico to cook nopales myself.